Well, good morning, everyone. I apologize that we advertised for 9 and we're not able to start until 9:30. Busy days, and I am sorry about that. However, we will now call to order this meeting of the Douglas County Board of Equalization. This meeting will be conducted in compliance with Nebraska's open meeting laws, a copy of which is up on the back wall. And I would ask our clerk, Dan Esch, if he would be so kind as to call the roll.
Mr. Morrison?
Present.
Mr. Boyle?
Here.
Mr. Kavanaugh?
Here.
Mr. Pratt is absent. Mr. Morgan?
Here.
Mr. Rogers? Mr. Chair?
Present. Thank you. First item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Is there anybody that would like to address this board on any topic that is not on the agenda? If so, this is the opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we will move on to resolution B, amend real property values previously adopted under Board of Equalization agenda item E on August 4th. What is the will of the board? We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Rogers. I'm sorry, second by Commissioner Boyle. Now, questions or comments to the motion? Catherine, where's Catherine? What, can you briefly explain what's in these two groups that we're looking at?
Sure. So, item B on the agenda is, these are property valuation protests for which a Form 25 property damage form was also filed, which would prompt the board to have two opportunities to take action, both on the damage report and the property valuation protest. The board did take action on both those items. On August 4th, the board took action on the property valuation protest. And last Friday, the board took action on the Form 25 property damage reports. The parcels here were specifically identified by the board for revisiting to discuss the recommended values for the property valuation.
And if I may add just a little bit, just to your county attorney's office. So we had a discussion on Friday about the best way. Commissioner Boyle had asked, how do we revisit those? And so there were two hurdles on Friday. One of them was getting them on the agenda. They are now on the agenda, so that has been addressed. The second question was, since they had already been voted on, how did the board take it up again? And so we, Catherine and I and Dan Ash spoke, and it is before you as a motion to amend, or excuse me, amend real property previously adopted, which is similar to a motion to rescind. But a motion to rescind would address the whole package, and you guys don't want to do that. You address many parcels on the board, and so a way to do a part of, it's like a motion to rescind in part. And so the motion or the matter before you is to amend something previously adopted. And so that is what this is. These are the parcels that Commissioner Boyle wanted to revisit on Friday.
All right.
For letter B.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Further questions or comments to resolution B? All right. Well, Commissioner Morrison.
So the agenda item is just for them to be heard.
Yes, and then you'll have to decide whether you don't want, if you want to raise or lower or keep it the same, but this would allow you to revisit the entire grouping on a beach. Every one of those decisions. Do whatever you see appropriate.
This is the items on list B.
On the beach.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
One second, if I may, Mike. I didn't realize that this included B. My house is on this list. I'm going to abstain. I'm in the process of we are selling our house to our daughter, but nonetheless, it does appear on this list, and therefore I have a conflict with voting on that.
It did.
Well, our house is on the list B.
I'm just saying I gotta
Sorry.
fix it.
Unless I'm confusing things.
May I clarify? It's
Please.
Agenda item B.
Agenda item B.
Okay, all right.
And then for agenda item C, which I'd be glad to discuss whenever the board is ready.
We'll get there in a minute. Okay, never mind. My conflict comes later.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
Yeah, I'm I don't have what Teresa just held up, a two-page thing. I don't know where that is. Were those passed out? Where is it? It's 2 pages?
Here, take mine.
The other two, the resolution.
This is agenda item B, and attached is the list of properties that you were concerned about on Friday.
Okay, now is that the same as this?
Yes, that's true.
Oh, yeah, so this is just
Okay, very good.
But I've got it.
Okay.
And so, okay, that's great, that helps.
Okay,
That's what I'm
all right,
saying.
further questions or comments? All right, Mr. Ash, would you please call the vote?
So this is just to revisit the item?
Yes, for agenda item B.
Yeah, resolution.
Okay. Commissioner Borgeson? Commissioner Boyle?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Brings us to item C, set the 2020 real property valuations for
Well,
protests.
if I may,
Okay.
so now you may revisit these values on agenda item B. Mr. Mullen, I think, had some questions or concerns about some of those properties and
Okay.
wanted to,
All right, all right.
I'm sure, argue for lower values. And so now these are before the board, and you can address them each in time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
So on the screen, if I may, on the screen are the parcels that are involved with this.
that's the complete list right there.
Yeah, you also show a hard copy of it. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Castleton.
I would ask that witnesses participating in this properly wear their masks. It's dangerous to us if you cannot cover your mouth and your nose. I'm not excited about this either, but it doesn't work unless you cover your mouth and your nose. It doesn't protect you, it protects us. Please wear your mask properly.
Mr. Walsh. Good morning.
Good morning, and appreciate the opportunity. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Your nose, Mr. Mullen, is part of this. Your
I'm
mouth
trying
and
to,
nose.
you know, I'm stuck with whatever I've got in this mask.
I'm sorry,
I've got another one.
I provide you with one, the county has masks.
Okay, if you've got it, that's great. Because what I have, I thought would work, but apparently it doesn't. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate the board taking the time to revisit this. I'll make this as hopefully as painless as possible. I want to start with with a couple of retail properties. We spent a lot of time on Friday talking about before 425 and the impact of the COVID, et cetera, and the board made their decision on that. But the retail space was in a downward spiral before the COVID even hit. We're in a world of e-commerce and Amazon and big box stores and bankruptcies, and it's a tough world at 12/31 of 19. I submitted I'll start with property. The address is known as 120-103 West Center. That was a property that was valued at $8.1 million in 2019 and was increased to $11.1 million in 2020. It's almost a 40% increase on retail. The major tenant over there is Maxx. I provided to the Board of Equalization a report put together by a company called JLL, which is actually known as Jones, Lang, and LaSalle out of Chicago. They're a real estate service company, public company, very reputable. They did an analysis on the entire area up there from 120 to about 125th Center. They did a market analysis, issued a broker's opinion of value. As of 12/31, they used an NOI per square foot of $5.80 and an 8.8 cap rate. The county's valuing this property at $6.36 a square foot, and using an 8.5 cap rate. The taxpayer's actual NOI, and the taxpayer's actual NOI over there is $754,000. The county's got an NOI of about $950,000. If I use my cap rate in the county's model and the JLL cap rate, I get $8.4 million worth of value. And my request to you is that, my comment to you is that retail didn't go up 40% in value at the end of 2019. I would request that we could get the same value the 8.193,500 that we had in 19 for 2020, and we wait and see how everything shakes out.
Commissioner Ward.
I want to ask you a quick question. You mentioned the NOI. Why is there such a difference in the NOI? The JLL did and what our assessor did? Just curious. I think you mentioned a couple $100,000 difference.
It is a couple $100,000 difference. I gave all the detail to the Board of Equalization that JLL provided. There was some additional vacancy that the county doesn't apply. I don't know how the county, what the methodology was. I talked to we talked to the referee when we did. He didn't have all of our information, so he was a little bit at a disadvantage. So I don't know how they got to their number, but JLL put this together, this opinion of value, because they were going to sell it. And
Yeah, I'm just thinking that would make a big difference in the numbers. And Rick, you're welcome to always correct me, but I mean, if they had the leases, the county, and so on, that's really important. Those vacancies were there last year than when you started on this.
right.
Okay.
Further questions or comments?
I would tend to agree. I mean, depending on the numbers of the NOI, Chairman, you know, the retail properties certainly, or homes, did go up 40% since last year. I mean, that's a pretty significant number. I mean, unless you somehow have a big increase in your rental income. So I'm not sure.
Commissioner Kaplan.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Board of Equalization referees relative to their numbers. I think it's important on each of these that we hear both sides of the case, so we hear numbers. And Mr. Mullen, before you go, on this sheet, it doesn't reflect the number that you're asking for. What's the number that you asked for?
Well, the numbers on that sheet, we send in revised data and revised evidence, and the number, because the property taxes were not calculated on the original number we determined. And so we sent in some supplemental information. I'm just asking that the 2019 value be reinstated on the theory that the value didn't go down or it didn't go up, it just stayed the same.
Okay, and what's that number then?
8,193,500 was the 2019 number.
Okay, and somebody from BOE?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you give me the rest of that protest number? I'm just not sure. What is it? A 20-007?
Hold on a second here. 20-007866.
Third from the bottom, I think.
I'll respond from wherever and however. All right, I'm pulling up that same parcel here, and what I've got from the protest, the referee stated that income calculation with rent from the rent roll. However, he wasn't completely clear on the expenses, and I think that and he says the NOI they are using is the same as the assessor. And I think probably the thought process, which when I coordinated, I agreed with, is we get some of these situations where we've got a lot of information, particularly on West Center Road, where some of these properties are actually operated as one economic unit, and the different parcels are pulled out individually. And I probably am not trying to think that they didn't try, because he indicated he tried to look at it there, but I'm thinking that it may have been too difficult to figure out how to break the expenses out of one statement into that specific property and get property specific to it. And at that point, I believe is where the dismissal probably came in on that. And I think that that's been a continual battle that we've had on some of these larger, more complex commercial properties is, quite frankly, even to get to this point, we're not afforded as much time as we would like, otherwise we'd be here till Christmas. So I'm not saying that Mr. Mullen is incorrect, but there may be a way to pull that information together that is something that he can discuss directly with the assessor's office. But given the time frame and what we had to do with, we felt dismissing it isn't always agreeing with the assessor, but we didn't find sufficient information that we could take in the protest and comfortably put that number down to where the protest had asked. And I didn't want to recalculate and go into a new mathematical analysis if I didn't have to.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
So, just so I'm clear, Mr. Musto, your position is $11,172,200.
That is correct.
Are you done?
I am.
Commissioner Morgan.
So I'd ask you, and I appreciate your comments and understand the challenge you face gathering all the information on these. But is Mr. Mullen accurate when he talks about a 40% increase over 2019?
You know, that has often been the discussion. I can't tell you how many comments I see, and it's just not commercial, residential, wherever, where somebody says, hey, I haven't done anything to my house, it went up 40%. Then you're looking at it, and when was the last time it was assessed? And it's not the rise in the value that is really being discussed here. Is the value that's set supported from market evidence? And that's on a January 1, January 20. Because somebody was underassessed at some point in time doesn't justify that they say. I guess I don't want to get up and go too far on this, but I don't like the idea of somebody saying, hey, I'm at this value, and then I go to this value. This value is right, but that big change can be impacting, particularly if you're a business owner and you're trying to figure out budgeting for the next year, and you realize, wow, this is something. I don't know the specifics without sitting down on this retail, but it is very often, as you understand, Commissioner Morgan, is it possibly could be a situation where you've got triple net rents where the taxes are being passed through to the tenants, and that can be impacting to those individual small tenants. It could be being paid by the property itself. I'd have to dig deeper into this, and just as if I were doing a commercial appraisal, and that doesn't happen in 10 minutes.
And what's important, I don't know that all the other commissioners would have this, but what normally happens on retail is it is leased triple net in Omaha, Nebraska. Almost all.
A large percentage, I would agree with you, yes.
And I would say it's probably 90% of the properties. I will tell you that on 78, where Old Chicago, Orange Theory are, they originally leased that 10, 12 years ago, and I wasn't involved in management, but I keep a pretty good interest in seeing what rents are doing, and we did handle one of the leases over there, or a couple of them, some time ago, and that's not a property that's on here, but they were getting $18 a square foot triple net, some even $20 where Old Chicago is. Today, if you told me you want to lease there, you can probably lease at $12 to $13 for sure, triple net. And if you said, well, is there space available? Well, I think I can get you probably 12,000 to 18,000 feet. That's how much is vacant today. Or was vacant in the last year and still vacant. So it isn't like it just happened in the last 6 months while the virus has been going on. That's been vacant for a good year. So that's, you know, an interesting scenario because in my opinion, and I don't even know if that one was presented, it's owned by some people I think out of South Dakota. But they probably have had the rents go down 20 to 30%, which does have an effect. And that's the one on 78 just to the north of Dodge right there in that corner. The trouble is we don't really have the information to know, hey, what is the NOI on this property and how much is vacant at this moment or last year. To know, I do think, and I'll just speak for myself, I mean, I think the 40% increase is a pretty substantial increase in retail property, and I don't mean that just because of the virus. I think we're seeing some challenges in retail for the last several years, in other places for that matter.
Commissioner, we did provide financial information.
Leases, et cetera.
Well, we provided the NOI.
But you provide the leases with that?
No, we didn't. We didn't. And that's why we included the JLL report, because it was independent third party. They reviewed all the leases.
Now, did you try to meet with the assessor before you went to the referees? Meaning, once you found out you were going to have that kind of an increase, there's a time to meet with the assessor about it?
I think that we might have back in February.
And I would say, and Mr. Goodwillie, you can always correct me, and I respect that. You know, it's always important when you start to see that you've had an increase in your property by the assessor, whether it's your home or business, building or something. I think to try to show the assessor, you know, provide them with the leases and the information. I've even given them my tax returns on commercial property so they see that the numbers are pretty accurate because you're reporting in your federal income tax, so that you can make your statement, you know, showing what the real income is.
And this would have been one of the bigger increases that we saw, so I'm sure, I know we met with them. I'm sure we met with them, and I'm sure we provided some information.
Well, I would suggest other commissioners talk about it, but I think there should be some consideration.
Commissioner Borges.
Mr. Mullen, what's the difference between, you said the GA or JLD or whoever it was that did this market analysis on these, what's the difference again between that, what value they placed on it and our assessor placed on it?
The difference was about $3.5 million. JLL is Jones Lang LaSalle. They're big real estate outfit out of Chicago, and they've been doing an ongoing assessment on this property. And as I mentioned to you on Friday, if you may recall, that cap rate, which started at 8 a year and a half ago, was 8.8 at the end of last year, and is 10.25 as of June 30. So they've been engaging, the property has been engaging these consultants, you know, as to, hey, what are we going to do with this property? And they're getting constant feedback. The NOI is going down. The vacancy is, those big users aren't renewing. The vacancy drives lower future rates. And there's more risk in the property in the eyes of the buyer. But their position is to provide the taxpayer, the owner, the value to market the property. And JLL would also market the property. So they have no reason to, it's just, these guys are professionals.
So on these three properties, all on the west side of the 12303, 12323, and 12103 West Center, the whole Westwood Height, Westwood Holdings LLC. So on the one that you specifically were talking about, they put an 8.4, is that what the number was?
Yes.
And after they did all these other properties at the same time?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the value on the 12323?
The value that they came up with?
Yeah.
I'll pull this sheet up. It was at $2,211,300 in the referee. I'm sorry, the referee kept it there, $2,211,300.
On 12303?
Yeah. 12323.
On 12323.
Yeah, what I read was 12323 West Center Road.
Commissioner, although that's on the list. I'm not gonna, we came to a common ground on that.
Okay, so then what about the 12303?
Yes, same analysis as 12303.
And you came to
The
an
block
agreement, so
west.
you weren't gonna talk about that?
I'm going to, yes.
Oh, you are gonna
Yeah,
talk about
yes.
it? What was the value they quoted on it?
Pardon me?
No, on the 2303.
12303, it was at $4,597,800. The referees dropped it roughly $200,000 to $4,395. Excuse me, $4,395,000.
And what was the group out of Chicago, what's their value?
3.662,
What you're asking?
yes.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm seeing no motions at this point. I'll call for one in a moment.
Okay.
I just, for me personally, I will not be supporting any of these. We have 400 protests that never got to be heard by a referee, never got this far in the process. We were overwhelmed with students. And I'm just uncomfortable giving some properties a second crack at the apple when 400 properties never got their first bite. So, to me, again, we're taking little bits of information in a short time frame and being asked to make pretty significant decisions based on that. I think there's a better process, and quite frankly, I think even at Turk, they can give a more appropriate hearing with a little more expertise than this board has. So that's where I'm going to be concentrated. Commissioner Dow.
Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree with that. No disrespect to Mr. Mullen or anybody else that's here today, but we just spent, I don't know, the better part of a half hour on this one property, and we have not reached any resolution. If you were inclined to at least move things by saying, on this list, let's just go with what our BOE has recommended, I would second that. And, you know, that may or may not go, but at this rate, just for Mr. Mullen's properties on this list, you could write off the balance of the day.
Well, we only have room for that.
Okay, so I think that, you know, it's kind of like, if we were in court, I'd advise you to listen to your lawyer. If you were in an operating room, I'd advise you to listen to your surgeon. And in this instance, I would advise us to listen to our EOD experts on things. They've done a good job under difficult circumstances. So if you wanted to make that motion, I would second it and we could move on.
It's rare that I find myself in agreement. This is kind of, to me, kind of.
Mr. Chair, if I could comment.
And I will get to you
Before any
we have-
motions are made.
Yes, absolutely. I apologize,
Sorry.
I followed you before. What I've always said is, if we are gonna hire smart people, we ought to listen. That's how I, whether it's the health department or whomever, if you hire smart people, you ought to listen to them. So that's where I'm at. And excuse me, Commissioner Boyle, I did not mean to slight you.
That's no problem, I just want to speak before we get.
Of course.
Jim, I'd say you should have been around in the day.
I'm sorry,
This is-
speak up,
you
please.
You should have been around in the day, this is nothing.
Oh,
I mean, we used to
I
spend
grew up in
day
the
after
day,
day
Mike.
after day
I
after
grew-
day
I grew
after
up-
day after day.
I grew up in the day where my father would sit for
It's nothing to
weeks.
have this little bit.
I understand.
But let me say this, I want to make sure you hear me. Just because these 400 people got screwed, and it's through no one's fault, but they're not even here before us, doesn't mean that we should say, okay, well, they got screwed, so now let's screw these people. That's not what we're here for. We're meeting because we're supposed to look at these and adjust them. We're not supposed to say, okay, hell with it, I want to go get some coffee and just approve all of them. We're not supposed to do that. That's abrogating our duty. So I hate to break that news to you, but we need to go through each one of these bloody messes and talk about it.
We just heard from them, and
Excuse
I'm
me,
fully
excuse
prepared to
me,
make a decision
Mr.
based on
Kavanaugh, excuse me. So we need to go through these one by one. So you know, we're not, unless we're gonna go totally robotic, then we just accept whatever the hell they bring us and we don't bother even meeting, so. I think it's important to go through this. There's some people that are hurting quite a bit, particularly these retail operations. There's a lot of people that are hurting too, individuals, but I believe that what is being proposed here as the requested value makes just as much sense as what the BOE came up with, and we'll hear from them, which is fine with me too. So maybe we should ask them to comment about why they came up with the total they thought. I'll let that up to the chair to decide. But if not, I would make a motion to grant the relief that the taxpayer is requesting.
Relative to, I mean, if this is a motion, I need to know one more specific.
Well, let's see.
Relative to one property or all of his properties? What?
The one property that is being discussed.
And that's 12103?
I think it's the third one from the bottom on our list. It's, let's see.
121.
12103 West Center, $10,334,922. I would make the motion. It's just about not even quite about $800,000 less than what is being recommended by the BOE.
I'm going to give a moment for a second to appear on that. I'm not going to, but Commissioner Morgan also had requested to speak.
I'll second it, but the other thing I want to say about people coming here is anyone who wants to come here could come here if they wanted. I mean, it isn't like you got, Mr. Mullen got some special invitation. Anyone could come here that wanted to come here, knowing that we've been meeting Friday and Monday. Am I accurate on that?
It is a public meeting. My guess is the 400 people whose properties we never had a chance to get to don't know that we never got to their properties, don't know that they could come here this morning and get a special audience, and perhaps still get a hearing that otherwise they're not going to get.
They need to get a hearing though, somehow.
Yep.
I think.
All right, we have a motion and a second before us.
Can I ask for a clarification? I believe Mr. Mullins asking for a different requested value than what's on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, based on the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that we had provided supplemental information as the real estate tax expense was not included in those original numbers, and that takes the number back down to $8 million. The prior year value of
I think you said $8,193,000.
you're correct, $8,193,500.
Why does it say requested total value?
So I think what Mr. Mullen was saying was the original request was 10.334 million, and then when they submitted some additional evidence, they feel like they were justified in asking for an even lower requested value.
Because the property tax expense wasn't deducted in the NOI.
All right, are people clear on the motion?
Well, I mean, Mike, is that what you wanted, what the value he was asking, or the 10.334 that you said in your motion?
I didn't say any dollar. Did I say a dollar amount?
I thought you did, yeah.
What do you say?
So they requested, say it again, Dan, the amount they requested was what?
$8,193,500.
Yes.
And how did you arrive at this, Mr. Mullen?
That was just last year's number.
Well, last year's number?
Well, it was a combination of two things. A was last year's numbers, and that isn't all that significant. What is significant is our NOI, after we deduct the real estate taxes, is $754,000. And if we use the JLL cap rate, what they say that property is worth these days, 8.9, we get an $8.2 million number, which
Okay.
is what it was last year.
All right, well, do you think that's a fair figure, $8 million or not? Compromise? No.
You know, without us having all of it, I hate to go down to the
Last year's.
8.2. I think it should be some compromise, and maybe Mary Ann, maybe good person, because she stated it and put you on the spot. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. It should be some compromise between that.
Are you thinking about $9 million?
Yeah, maybe it's 9.2 million. I mean, we don't have the real numbers in front of us, Mr. Mullen, and I'd like to make sure that, you know, it'd be great to see some of the numbers. It's just kind of tough, but I think that, that still would be an increase, somewhere around 12-15% if we're 9.2. So mine, whatever,
I'll take your advice.
9.2.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah, I'll take your advice, BJ.
So the motion is at 9.2 million.
Yes, yes.
Correct? Mr. Ash? All right, Commissioner Galvin.
Okay, well, to complete the bidding process, I guess we've heard from Mr. Mullen, we've heard from our colleagues, we've heard from DOE. Does the assessor have an opinion on these valuations? Might as well hear from everybody.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor Register of Deeds Office. To reiterate something that Mr. Musto said, it's possible that these properties were reappraised for this year for the first time in a number of years. And so going from one number to another number in and of itself doesn't really tell you a lot.
Is it what?
I'm sorry, going from one number to another number doesn't necessarily always tell you a lot if you don't know the history. And so what really matters is, are you in the right place from a market value standpoint in any particular year? I really don't have the background data for this stuff. I mean, I've had to walk in here with stuff for 7,000 properties and I don't have it. So I'm not going to throw a number out there in particular. What I will say is, as you look at these, the referee who actually had the property record file that we provided and the information that the taxpayer provided had a chance to review them both, I would give a lot of weight to their comments. And so if they recommended some small reduction, okay. If they recommended stay the same, okay. And I'm going to bite my tongue a little bit when I say this, if they recommend a big reduction, okay. Because what will happen is, we'll go back to the office and we'll take a look at why the referee recommended what they recommended. If we think they were way out to lunch, we have the avenue of appealing to the Tax Equalization and Review Commission. And we've done that on occasion. And if, on the other hand, because value is a range rather than a particular set number, if we think that referee's recommendation, even if it reduces the value we suggested, is in the ballpark, we're probably going to leave it alone. So what I would do, if it were me, but a majority of citizens in your districts elected you, and nobody has elected me to anything, what I would just say is, with each property you discuss, you probably want the referee's recommendations up there and be able to take a look at why they recommended, after looking at stuff in a more detailed way than you're getting to look at it, why they recommended what they recommended. So that's, I would just defer to the referee there.
Mr. Goodwillie?
Yes.
There's, okay.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. You know,
Okay,
it's
yeah, it looks
interesting.
like, if you look at the history there, it looks like they haven't really been touched in any meaningful way in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years leading up to 2020. I'm not as familiar with my commercial numbers as I am residential, but in that window from 2015 to 2020, the median selling price for a single-family residential home in Douglas County went from 150K to 225K, which is 50% from the starting point. I don't know if commercial or some species of commercial are doing anything like that. What I will say, though, is that's an awfully long time to go without a reappraisal. And so I would take that whole, the outrage over the 40% with a certain grain of salt. Had they been getting gradual increases if the market merited, they would have been dealing with higher values and paying additional taxes all along. Nobody likes these kinds of catch-up increases, but that's what happens with that whole, well, we went up this much, from last year to this.
Okay, Mr. Goodwillie, let me just say something. I'm not sure why it went down in, 18, then back up in 19, but I will say this deal, when you talk about the 5 years, that's why I mentioned a property that's in a great area on 78th and Dodge that I've never had anything to do with, where today you can rent it for at least 30 to 40% less than you could rent it for 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And that's what's happened. in the retail industry in Omaha, Nebraska, and I see that in other locations, whether it's Countryside Village, which I also have never had anything to do with ever in my life, or 78. So you are seeing it, and I think that if we did something where we had that increase, as Mike made the motion of 9.2 million, there is $1 million increase in that, and I think what that behooves Mr. Mullen to do for his client is to bring in those financial information, and sometimes it's good to get it to the board before, if we're meeting as DOE and you're planning to come here to show us the real numbers on that sort of thing, or make sure the referee gets to see those numbers also. It's real important. But thank you.
Yes, we have a couple of people we have to speak. Commissioner Boyle.
I'll just quickly say, Commissioner Morgan really covered what I believe. I think, there are a lot of properties that are really depressed because of what's happened. And particularly if you go out 132nd Center, wherever there are, all those places, there's a lot of vacancies and a lot of restaurants closing, and a lot of, places are, Julio's went down, now it's back up supposedly. But the market out there has been really rough. And even if this has remained unchanged for a period of time, I lived in a condo that none of them ever changed. And I didn't turn them in because, frankly, because my neighbors would have thrown me out the window and hung me from the second floor. So I think Mr. Morgan explained it pretty well, and I would support his conclusion.
Thank you. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Mr. Mullen, you represent all these properties that are on this page.
I don't have your page, but I'll say both of them, if not all of them.
Okay. Is this the only one that you're taking up this morning?
I've got 3 or 4 others.
I'm sorry.
I have 3 or 4 others.
Oh, you have 3 or 4 others?
Yes.
I kind of go with what our experts have been telling us relative to the history and the expertise that they brought to bear. I guess I'm not real comfortable, all due respect to Mr. Mullen and his argument, for just cherry picking a few properties and coming in and saying, times are tough. Times are tough for all these people. This is a pandemic that's covering our entire economy, and the economy, well, the bottom's falling out. So I appreciate the argument that perhaps it's not yielding the income that it had last year when times were good. But I also hear the argument that they haven't seen an increase. As a matter of fact, the only variance in this property in the last 5 years was a decrease during a very, very hot market. So, I guess I'm just trying to be as fair as I can to everybody on this list who's not getting consideration for the fact that they probably came in the same as Mr. Mullen's clients and said, we've really been hit bad by the fact that the bottom is out of our economy. And that's true. But that doesn't change the opinion of the Board of Equalization, of the assessor, the experts that we pay to do this job. And so, to come up with a number that's just arbitrarily between 8.1 where they are now and 11.1 where the Board of Equalization and the assessor say they should be, and say 9.2, strikes me as pretty arbitrary. We're just kind of doing, let's make a deal on individual properties. And, I haven't seen anything here that would lead me to believe that this kind of an argument couldn't apply to every single property that we have in this list that's experienced an increase. And I defer to my colleague, Mr. Morgan, who has expertise in this field. Isn't that true? I mean, aren't all the properties that we're talking about, these commercial properties, suffering the same as the ones that Mr. Mullen is representing, pointing out to us?
Well,
If you're through, he was the next to speak anyway, so
I'm really looking
if
for.
you would answer it, the floor is yours, Commissioner Morgan.
first of all, I made a comment, Commissioner Kavanaugh, before, that like at 78, that property's vacant a year ago. You you could have leased it at $13 instead of 18. So it isn't just because of the virus, and I wanted to be clear on that because we talked about 425. Commissioner Boyle mentioned 131st and Center. If you want to, again, I don't have anything to do with that property. Don't do much retail at all, except on 13, that little Bohemian and that. And we didn't protest, okay? But anyhow, when you go out west, 131st and Center, and you're on the north side of the street, it's unbelievable.
It's all vacant.
Back, all vacant. I mean, it's a disaster. If you told me I need 50,000 feet out there, you couldn't get it all in one location. There's so much vacancy, and that didn't just happen in the last 5 months. They tore down some of the buildings. There were retail buildings that were all full at one time. So it is a tough deal. And what we're doing is putting a 12% increase. Now, people wanted to come down because they weren't happy with their residential property, as we saw last Friday when we met. They could be here to talk about it. And, you know, I hope we can take it quickly because I'm assuming there's a few other people here on retail or on residential, and I want to get to those for sure before we have to leave this room. So if you can cover your others. We have a motion on the floor, and if other commissioners are okay, I call for the question on this, to go with that increase, knowing that rents have gone down in the last 3 and 5 years, without question.
Okay, and further questions or comments from the commission before we vote?
The question's been called.
Technically, that requires vote. I just want to make sure everybody said their piece
Yes.
before we vote. Therefore, I would like to call for the vote.
All right, so motion is to set the value at 9.2 million, total value is 9.2 million for 1 plus Center Road. Commissioner Morrison,
Yeah.
Commissioner Boyle,
Yes?
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
No?
Commissioner Kraft is absent, Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers. No. No. Chair Duda.
No.
Motion fails 3-3.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Boyle.
Jim, we go back a couple hundred years in our families, okay? I just want to ask you, if we're not here to make these adjustments, why do you think we're here? To just wholesale say, yes, you did everything perfectly, you're absolutely right, and he's all wet, these properties, I mean, we are here to make adjustments. And some of these won't be adjusted, some of them will. So please don't think this is the price is right, it's not. Again, you had to be here to really see what really went on in the past. But it's unfortunate, we have a bunch of them that aren't even done. We need to get the law changed. So please accept your responsibility.
I totally respect your
Just don't-
position, and if you'll recall, on Friday, I voted for 2 adjustments. I voted to do just exactly what
Well-
you're saying on Friday, and I recall, because my father sat as a Board of Equalization member for years and years,
Yeah.
when we sat as this board
Yeah.
and did them all individually. I appreciate your position.
Okay.
It's not all cases are the same, so.
Yeah,
if you
right.
recall last Friday, you and I were in agreement on a couple of
Sure.
properties. I just don't agree on this one.
Okay, well, it sounded like you're just down, the whole system sucks, and it doesn't suck
I'm
totally.
sorry if you got that impression.
I did, I saw it.
The system's not perfect, I think everybody will
Okay,
agree with
fine,
that.
okay, that's fine, let's move on then.
All right,
Thank you. So are we left at 10,334,922?
there was no adjustment made.
Okay,
Mr. Muller, do you have other?
Yeah, the next property I want to talk about is the Magnolia Hotel down across from New York. Again, we talked about the 425 last week. It's not working. It's not going to be available for give these guys some relief. There's nobody in the commercial in the real estate space that's got killed more than the hotel is. And notwithstanding the COVID, these guys' business has been going on the last couple of years. They're fighting a bunch of new product downtown. The county's got a valuation on this property of $14,666,400. They use an NOI of $1,503,310. We provided all this financial information. Our NOI is $1,116,759 in 19. It was $1,335,000 in 18. It's steadily declining. The $1,116,000 using the county's 10.25 cap rate is a value of $10,895,210, and that's what we're asking for. And one other comment: the Magnolia Hotel will lose money in 2020.
Commissioner Rogers?
I'm kind of trying to grasp the timeline. You're saying it'll lose money in 2020, but this is based on January 1. This is based on last year.
I fully understand. I just give you that as a point of reference, Commissioner.
Yeah, your argument will be relevant next year.
I'm not making the argument.
You're saying they're going to lose money in 2020.
They are.
This argument will be relevant next year based on everything I know. So
Thank you. You're
I'm
correct.
off on your.
But I'm not off on my numbers because I've got an NOI for 2019 of $1,119,000, and the county's using an NOI of $1,503,000. My point was that there's a continuing trend of declined NOI at that hotel, which is a limited service hotel that employs 130 people at home.
Did I hear you say, I'm just wanting a correction, Claire, did I hear you say the county has a number of, I'm not a hotel guy at all, but you said something about it was $1 million, the county's using $1.5 million income and the real income is $1 million?
$1,000,001, that's correct.
So I defer, I assume you told the referees, showed them those numbers.
We showed them those numbers.
And their tax return or
We
whatever.
provided 3 years worth of financial statements.
Let's hear it from
If I may, I'll get to you in a
Apologize.
moment, since I would like Commissioner Callahan had to say.
Okay, well, this is kind of exactly what I was asking for. Let's get the other side from BOE and assessor and see where we're at.
Okay.
I want to be very quick on this and then just follow up with a very small comment, but under the information that we talked about here, owner's rep provided a summary of 2019 financial statement. Again, summary, with an NOI of $1,117,000. However, this is the referee speaking. When I do the same calculations, he comes up with a higher NOI of over $2 million, which returns a higher value than the assessed value. Therefore, he dismissed it. Now, I want to speak to that quickly, is that we don't have time to go through forensic accounting when we're looking at each and every one of these. We don't have the capabilities. So there may be a difference in numbers there, substantiated or not, and much to Mr. Commissioner Morgan's point on the retail, he is so right, but we've got to avoid this plug and play of just sticking numbers in when it doesn't agree with one of their numbers and leaving everything else the same, because they're all interrelated. And when you've got a commercial property that's fully leased up and you stick in the rent that should be there, the vacancy and collection, the normal operating expenses, and a normal supported market capitalization rate, you get a value. If the property's half vacant, you can't put in a 50% vacancy factor and say my income's here and keep everything else the same, because there's other risk factors and everything involved. That would say on January 1, if I owned a hotel and I put nobody in there on January 1, my vacancy is 100%. Therefore, my value must be 0. It doesn't track. The knowledge that we've got from the expertise of these appraisers is thousands of hours of experience, hundreds of hours of education, and they're trying to do this within a very short time frame. And I do believe we can have a discussion on anything forever, because it's an opinion of value. But there's a supported range, and many of these we're probably very close if we can lean back on some of the expertise that these individuals have, who have also done many, many private appraisals. So, I'm not trying to break up the party, but I kind of feel like every time we do something, we're not allowed to explain it because we've got a box with 5 lines. And we got 5 minutes.
I appreciate that. I mean, you're kind of going macro when I'm talking micro. I'm talking this property, as Commissioner Boyle has pointed out, each one is kind of different, and we try to give them, when they come before us individually, individual attention. So I'm looking at the history here, like I did on the last one. And it looks like 15 at 7.3, 16 at 7.3, 17 at 7.3, 18 at 7.3, 19 is 14.6, and, you know, 28, we have a recommendation to stay at that number. Am I correct in that chronology?
You're correct in the chronology, but I'm not looking at the earlier numbers as defining where my number is today.
I appreciate it, but, you know, just kind of a case of first impression point of view, it looks like from 18 to 19, it kind of went up 7 million. Is that a fair appreciation of what those numbers are? I'm just asking for information here, not interpretation. Did it look, am I right in saying they got a 7 million bump between 18 and 19?
Mathematically, that shows a 7 million bump, yes, sir.
And I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, I kind of have expressed my agreement with what you're saying in terms of the process is not perfect. Perhaps the assessor has an opinion on this? This particular property's history here?
Yeah, Commissioner, I don't have any reason to doubt that the chronology was wrong. The chronology is correct.
Right.
Those numbers are correct.
Right.
I don't know how far back the tail was for that $7 million value, but it looks like it was there for a long time. And so my suspicion is, come 2019, we reappraised downtown hotel.
I see, you don't have the capacity with your laptop or anything to access those numbers going back. And our BOE, do we have the capacity to go back beyond 15?
Let me pull up the historical form. I'm sorry,
It would just go back 5 years if it was protested before. So this is the assessor's webpage. They go back, they do the current year plus the previous 5 years, and then in our BOE system, it would, if they protested this property since 2016, we would have.
I mean, it looks like a massive improvement in the improvement category. The land stays relatively the same, but the improvement category seems to double. And I don't know if there's something.
Commissioner, I can give you what is on that assessor page there that he's going to pull up, which does give you a value back to 2012, and it just shows that it goes BOA, Turk, BOE, Turk, BOE, Turk, reassessment, BOE, probably go back to Turk. There it is, right there.
These are kind of codes as to why what happened.
Yeah. What is RA?
Reappraised, Commissioner.
Sorry?
Reappraised.
So did Turk reduce it?
In 2015, well, for the 2014 year, Turk, in
6 years.
2013, in 2012. So in 2012, 2013, and 2014, Turk set it at a value of $7,301. Keep doing that. $7,301,600.
Okay.
So to move on,
Well, I mean, it just seems to me, this is a hospitality industry facility. I'm familiar with this facility. They've gotten hit probably harder than anybody. I don't know, are they open? Are they taking guests at the Magnolia?
Today, yes, they were shut down for 4 months.
but Jim, the only thing is, we're not supposed to take that into consideration because it was a value as of January, correct? But I will say this, it looks to me that Turk took it back to the 7.3, yet we're giving them about 100% increase. And I gotta tell you, I'd make a motion that we ought to compromise between those two numbers and let it come in next year, because I think Turk did reduce it to that number, did their intensive study. And if I was doing it, I'd probably say that we should put it in between those numbers, which would be somewhere around the 9.6 million or so.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle.
Well, just to move things on, I'll make a motion that we adjust it to 9.6 million. I'll wait and see if I get a second.
You're not gonna wait long, because I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to subject property.
I think Mr. Borgerson wants to speak too.
Yes, she does. Do you have anything else to say to this point, Commissioner Borgerson?
So you're requesting 10, Mr. Mullen?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I reading that right, 10.8?
Yes, ma'am.
And we're
Let's go with that.
And the motion's at 9.6.
No, they're gonna be a substitution to what you requested, but my question is gonna be before that, is last year it was at 14,666,400. Did you guys protest it to turf, or
Yes.
appeal it to turf?
Yes.
And is that still waiting, or did they not do it? I don't see a decision by turf.
There's been no hearing.
So it's still sitting down at turf?
Right, right. And the taxpayer understands that that's a 2-year exercise to get on the calendar and a 1-year exercise after that to get a decision.
Right, okay, I just wanted to make sure that we knew that if you went to turf and that there is no hearing yet on 2019. So 2020, you're requesting 10.895, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. They're requesting 10.895.
I'll go with Commissioner
So are
Forrest.
we at the requested number now?
Commissioner Kevin.
Yeah,
10.8?
10.895.
I agree with
All right, the maker and seconder of the motion,
Agree.
so the motion stands now at 10.895 million.
Yes.
Okay, and we have a second. Questions or comments to the motion before us?
That's what's there.
Right, that's what's requested.
So no need to act on this.
Because, no, what was approved was 14,666,400.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the effect of this motion would be to reduce. All right. Okay, all right, if I put on the motion then for us, further questions or comments? Mr. Clerk, would you please call the vote?
Motion set the Magnolia property for total value of $10.895 million. Commissioner Borgeson. Yep. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Pratt is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
No.
Motion passes 5-1.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else, Mr. Bowles?
We jump to the very last one, WOSC LLC, 21015 Cumberland. That is a property that was built a year and a half ago to house youth sporting events, do training, provide basketball, volleyball. They support tournaments. Pardon?
What is this?
The last one.
The last one. They built that building for $7.4 million at the end of 2018. They've also been shut down here in 2020, just by the way.
Is this Union Bank and Trust?
Pardon me?
Is this Union Bank and Trust?
That's Union Bank and Trust had the naming, they sold the naming rights to that building.
But this is that building?
That building where they have youth sports?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
You trying to say that that building didn't get used last year?
I'm saying that building did get used last year, it's not getting used in 2020. Different issue, I'm not talking about 2020 though. This is just.
Because I lived out there.
Sure, oh yeah, yeah. No, they bring a lot of people in Omaha, they have tournaments, they bring up, they're a good magnet for West Omaha. They're valued at just short of $10 million. They've got $7.5 million in cost in the project. That's all they want. They think the value is what they spent to put the project together, and that's what they want their value to be. And on a per square foot basis, that $10 million is about $75 a foot. What we're asking for at the $7.5 million is about $55 a foot, which is a little bit more than the valuation BOE gave the baseball land property over around 120th and I. So just from an equalization perspective.
Commissioner Forrest.
So on the history, again, 2019, value did you ask in 2009?
The same number, cost.
All right.
I mean, the theory was that they put 7.5 in it. When they turned the key to open the front door, it didn't pop to 10.
It didn't work?
It didn't pop in value to 10 million.
Oh, gotcha.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boyle.
I'll make a motion that we set the value at $7,412,425. And I also have a question. I'm just fascinated. What is they're not a nonprofit. What are they? I can't believe that. I mean,
No,
we'll talk about
No,
that.
they're a for-profit.
They're a for-profit.
I know. Gee whiz.
Dan, did you get the
I don't know why.
No.
By Commissioner Boyle.
Or, okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, good question.
Well, Commissioner, yeah, we have others.
Okay.
to
Oh,
speak
I'm
to.
sorry. Same thing. What does BOE say? What does the assessor say?
On the BOE's side of this is there's two components to this, and we have seen this last year and this year. Last year it was submitted, and they were asking for $6 million in values because they were backing out all the soft costs and all these things that were associated with building it. I'm not disputing that accounting. It's mathematically calculated. Same this year. Mr. Mullen is requesting this based upon the cost, the money that they spent to build the property. That can be a derivative of how you come up to a value, minus, of course, any entrepreneurial fee that would have been added onto that because somebody wouldn't do it for free. The assessor's office does it as an income approach, and they provide a rent, a vacancy expense, and a capitalization rate, and that's where their value calculates from. On that, we come back to, I don't believe we have one side arguing income, one side arguing cost, and neither one of them provided us the other component to accurately dispute one another. So we have dismissed this. I don't like to leave it in this vein, but sometimes we're not going to make anybody happy, and we're not going to go down the middle without being able to defend one number or the other. I apologize for that, but sometimes it has to move on to the next level for that reason.
I hear you. Just in general, and because this is happening this year, do you make inquiry to these people when they come before us for a hearing, whether they're receiving payments, from the federal government, PPE payments or other payments as a result of the pandemic? I mean, a lot of businesses are getting a lot of support from the federal government, and I don't know if that's playing a part because they're coming in and saying, rightfully, our business is gone because of the pandemic. Well, yes, but I know people in the private sector who are doing just fine because they're receiving federal support under the PPE and other federal support acts.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, they're doing better than fine. So is that inquiry made at this point?
Now, Commissioner, understand, and we had this discussion beforehand, the value as of January 1, 2020, we are to essentially, for lack of a better term, put on blinders and pretend we didn't know what was going to happen on January 2nd or any there forward.
Right.
We are treating this as if we are looking in the rearview mirror at 19, we hear on 20, what would somebody pay for this property? And they are going to pay based upon seeing what it has operated as, because we don't know the future, but everybody buys on anticipation of income that is going to be generated, not always on historical, but historical is your best indication, and therefore you look at that.
And thanks for that reminder. I think part of what we do here is we sit like a court of equity. We try to do, yes, I understand what you're saying, but we're trying to do the right thing, all things considered. And so, yes, you're right, but, we're sitting in the middle of a pandemic, and maybe people's, like Magnolia, business was just closed and unable to have any income whatsoever. On the other hand, maybe they got subsidies from the federal government, and those are things that I guess would inform me, and maybe Mr. Mullen knows whether his client was able to receive any subsidies from the federal government's PPE or other subsidies because of the pandemic.
My understanding is that it's a heavy youth employment operation out there, a bunch of high school kids. They're part-time employees. He's got very few full-time employees. He's got some. So he did get some PPE money, but it wasn't very much because that's all driven on payroll, and he didn't have a lot of payroll. Because he's a seasonal employer with $8, $9 an hour jobs for his referees, and referees all contract anyway. He doesn't have a lot of payroll out there. So that in that PPE game, if you don't have payroll, you don't get much help.
Mr. Goodwillie?
I think Mr. Mustard did a better job of explaining the income approach than I possibly could.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Rogers.
Chris. Okay,
I'm sorry, I gotta pull my glasses off because they fog up. I'm fighting this, but I'm trying not to.
You just said that one person's arguing the account method, one person's arguing the income, and nobody gave you the data.
Correct.
So they give you accounting. Who's supposed to give you the income method? The assessor's
The
office?
assessor's office.
Okay.
I mean,
What are we supposed to use though? I always thought when it's for profit, you're using the income method.
well, okay, even if it is for profit and it's owner occupied, you're generating an income approach that may not be there. Doesn't mean you can't. Cost is not an unreasonable approach, but there's more components to it, I believe. I mean, we go through the...
So with the accounting method is the cost?
Essentially, yes.
This is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, like they listening to this, you got this income method, I'm thinking it's supposed to be used for commercial, this side of it, and not the residential side. And I feel like that just saying this accounting side is, I'm trying to figure out which one.
Let me ask you a simple question.
Okay.
If I were to build a 10,000 square foot building, and you needed a 10,000 square foot building, and it cost me $1 million to build it, and I just got done building it, I had all my land, my cost, everything, I put it together, and I can calculate to the penny why it cost $1 million, rounded, not even rounded, $1 million. And I turned around to you and I said, Mr. Rogers, would you like to buy this building? And you say, absolutely, I need that building. He says, I'll sell it to you for $1.1 million. And he said, but you only spent $1 million. But I had to put the whole idea together and get it to that point. Now, you can go build your own building for $1 million. But are you going to want to go do that? Wait, the time, the risk, all that's involved in it, when you can have this one today. It's conceptually, we're talking about valuation, which is much deeper than what we can really visit on this floor. Mr. Mullen is not incorrect on laying out those numbers. Mr. Goodwillie is not incorrect on laying out that income approach to value.
Okay, let's stop right there, because that's what I'm going to ask. What are we supposed to be looking at? The income side of this, because when the accounting side, I feel like you're talking about a tax return for a business that we should be looking at. I mean, when he's talking accounting side, I'm hearing
because it's
using tax laws and stuff like that to bring the number down.
Well,
but on this side, you're not.
We left out, other than we touched on that sales approach, which is the one in between. Now, if I could go find a building identical to this that sold last week and it's across the street, there I've got my comparison. There aren't many of these. This is a unique property, so it needs a unique approach to looking at the valuation. Again, you could also be in Mr. Mullen's situation. What I believe he's arguing is if you spent $10 million to build that building and you turn around and say it's for sale, somebody may not want to give you more than $7.5 million for that if he can demonstrate that, because it's a super adequacy, an over improvement. I put on gold painting when I should have only just done flat white. I mean, I apologize. I mean, I literally have been not sleeping for the last week to try to punch these through. My mind's not going square, and I'm thinking, you know, we could go into this discussion, and I'm not trying to say anybody's wrong, other than we've looked at it. We looked at it in this tiny little box that we were allowed to look at it on this one date.
What's the box you're supposed to look at it, income or
and that one date, and this is what we came up with. Can I sit down and have a lengthy discussion with both parties and come to another conclusion? Very possible.
But what box are we supposed to look at it by law?
By law, January 1.
No, I mean, are we looking at an income those boxes or the county put them?
There's no requirement that you look, you gotta look at a valuation box, which includes those pieces.
All right, Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I think, in my book, I really appreciate this. These people work their tails off, obviously. But, someone, I believe it was Mr. Musto said that it was $6 million with no soft costs, and so I don't know. I mean, I also am looking at what this organization does, and I'm quite amazed that they are a for-profit. With the work that they do and the hiring the students and all the rest of it. I have several grandchildren that play in similar sports, not necessarily this one, maybe they do, I don't know. But I mean, it's a huge athletic program that really gets kids involved and so forth. And so I'm also looking at the good that they do for the community. I mean, that's a big deal. It's a huge deal, getting kids off the street and organizing the programs that they have. So I really think that, listening to everything here, I can understand it, but we are here to try to reach some common ground that's fair, that's reasonable for the operation, and that taxes them appropriately. And I think that it's at that $7.4 million figure. I really do. I think that's a lot of money to begin with, and they already have the other, in their history is they've got the other one sitting in Turk, and they probably won't find out about that for years. So that's why I made the motion. I think I made a motion.
We have a motion on the floor, so
Yeah.
Commissioner Dunn will vote.
So Mike, based on, the discussion that we just had, this place was built for that number, if I understand that. That's what they.
6 million.
I thought it was 7.4 they built it for.
Correct.
It was 6 million.
You're right.
Plus the soft cost,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Plus the land.
I mean, based on it's worth more after you build it than what you build it for, argument, yes, Mr. Moore?
Not necessarily, because if someone's buying it, they may have a different use. Now you come in and do the changes, and that really sometimes hurts a property. I'd like to sell property for what it costs to build these days. It's a little challenging, because somebody else may have a different use now, for that building, and then you gotta adapt. It's like seeing that, what was the grocery store on 114th and Dodge. On
Bag and Save?
Bag and Save. It's only been sitting vacant for 7 years. Because somebody has to adapt it now to a new use, and it's tough. I'm surprised it is in a sports field. So it is a challenge.
Okay, any further?
What was it built at? He came on operation in 19, in 08 actually. They had 9. What was it built at?
I think it came online at the end of 18.
Yeah. What was the cost he built at? They said.
The cost was about 6.1, and then we got about $1 million in the dirt, $1.2 million, so that's where the 7.4 comes from.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments?
I'd like to make one quick comment. I think that points out that, when they opened the doors, they had 7.4 million in it, and then they turned around and they got a valuation of 9.9 million. So they only had a valuation of $10 million, went up 3 million from the time they were ready to open the door to the time they opened the door, and there they are with a $3 million jump, which is unreasonable.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Commissioner Kavanaugh.
I think we're talking a range here between the 7.4 building price and the 9.9, which they've never done anything but challenge. They're in turf now on that from before. And it would strike me that, maybe if it's not 9.9, it certainly is not 7.4. I mean, if there's any value added to the actual facility back to, as our DOE people point out, the first of the year, pre-COVID, it's not 7.4, some other number. I don't know, Mr. Morgan, you might have some insight to it.
Can I? So I hear your case. I'm not in the field, but I've been out that place. So if it was built for 6 something and you got 7 in 08, in 18, sorry, I'm definitely not comfortable taking 7. I will go 8 somewhere, but I'm not going out 7. So I'm just saying, because I lived out there, they make me kill it.
agree to that change, and I'm gonna tell you one thing, I think, isn't it closed now?
It was closed until the first part of July.
About, July, they got to-
Okay.
But they're
So
limited.
they can come back next year and show us what their income numbers are. Yeah. So
You
I'll do
know,
what
I
you
think
said,
this is
Chris.
moving in the right direction. I just asked one question, and I don't know, this is strictly, kind of a lawyer's question. If we go with the 8, which, strikes me as the compromise that is fair, and these guys are at Turk on 9.9, do they submit our 8 to Turk as evidence that it's not 9.9? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Every year stands on its own.
say again?
Every year stands on its own, so.
Okay, fine.
So this has no
So
impact on
we have the
this year.
motion based on what Chris said.
Okay, so the motion is at 8 million?
An
Can I
amendment
ask,
to the
just for
motion.
psychological reasons, 7.9? Chris, do you object to 7.9?
Yeah, that's just like,
Yeah,
with 9.99, with.
Aha, you object to it?
I'd rather 8.1 or something, but I'm giving you 80.
All right, I'll go with 8.
Where's Commissioner Kraft when we need him?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, we have a second.
All right, you were the seconder on the motion, are you agreeable at 8 million? Okay, so the motion, Mr. Clerk, now stands at 8 million. Further questions or comments to the motion? If not, I would call for the vote.
Commissioner Morganson. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes.
Commissioner Duda.
No.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you. Anything else,
Thank you.
Mr. Lowell?
The two other quick items, Commissioner. It's a house at 14240.
May I just ask first, how many people here have items to bring to our attention this morning? I'm not sure how many. Okay, all right, because we've only got 2 hours to meet, and we've already given you an hour, so I want to make sure.
Really wrap it up quick.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, no more than
Which one is it?
7 more minutes. It's a house at 14243 Hamilton Street. It was, the house was valued $1,580,000 a year ago.
It's not on this.
Sorry, Mr. Mullen. We're just,
Oh, I'm
this
sorry.
item's only taking out those previous ones.
I'm sorry.
We put it up on the screen, maybe?
No, it's not on
No,
the sheet.
it's not this agenda item.
It was on yesterday, wasn't it?
No.
It wasn't on this sheet, I don't think.
Who's the
I thought it was on
control?
yesterday.
Well, you'll get to take it up, it's just this item is specifically for those parcels that we voted on last Tuesday.
The last item, Dan, if you could check this, there's a property called Earthstone, with a 7605 Cass. That was on the.
Yeah, you're right, that would have been on Tuesday.
Right,
Yeah.
that's the last one.
So let me, I got a whole different sheet here.
So you have, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Morrison?
thank you. Just for clarification, you have a residential one that would be taken up after this agenda item. But you have one more that's not on the sheet, but it was on the sheet Friday.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This is the Outback Steakhouse on 76th and Cass. The county just raised the value of the land this year. Took it from $930,000 to $1,245,000. They're valuing the land over there on 76th and Cass at $18.75 a square foot. We gave an equalization comp a block away on a piece of property for $7.50 a square foot. The Burger King and the Verizon on 78th and Dodge, or 76th and Dodge, that land is at $18, so I think we're getting a Dodge valuation on Cass Street. As you go up and down Cass Street, it's $7 to $9. One of the important factoid is that Outback only has 4 years left on that lease. And their plan is, my understanding is they're not going to renew. And so if that property gets scraped, that's what the value is. So the value of those types of properties are normally in the lease, and there's only 4 years lease term left. So all we're asking is for last year's value.
Okay, so we've got 6 minutes. Let me ask you, what's the total value of it?
The total value is $1,789,100.
And the land's valued at how much of that?
$1,245,900.
And that's the same value on that land as Burger King on Dodge?
It's more on a per square foot basis.
On the land value?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the referee again?
Absolutely.
That seems like,
Got it in a nutshell here. When we're looking at this, you want to fight land, you can fight your land value, but you cannot ignore the total value. We have to go back to the total value. You cannot pick one component and say, I'm going to play with this one without knowing what the impact or effect could be on the rest of it. If it would be, I don't know, I mean, I didn't even get a chance to pull this one up, but if that restaurant is worth $1 million, then sure, it's wrong, but if it's worth $2 million, if you put it on the land or the building, they're taxed the same. There's not a separate. It's been one of my arguments is why we even do a separation of land and building on an improved property. It should be one value because that's all we're really concerned about, the end value.
agree with you, but what's the square footage of that building?
About 3,500, 3,700 square feet.
6,000.
62.
So they got it valued at $200 a foot.
$300 a foot. It's a short $1,008,000. It's $1,789,000.
Oh. Yeah, $300 a foot?
Yes.
Well, I happen to be in an office building that's fully occupied on 78. Someone wants to buy it for $120 a foot. Gladly sell it.
We'll just say restaurants are different
lot.
than commercial buildings.
What's the owner's name?
Earthstone.
Commissioner, kind of, we didn't include that on that sheet. He's within his, it was an item that was on last Tuesday's agenda, just for some reason got left on this
We
list.
got restaurants.
7605.
That's right, wrong, or otherwise I'm just saying.
Okay, further questions, comments? Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Mr. Goodwillie, anything from the assessors?
I'm with Commissioner, I'm with Mr. Mustard.
Commissioner Boyle.
Mr. Mullen, what would you request on behalf of the taxpayer?
They'd be happy with last year's value.
Last year's?
Last year's value, which was $1,473,500.
I'll make a motion that that's what we set it at.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second, for 7605 passed to set it at $1,473,500. Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Quick question for Mr. Mullen. What was, since the onset of the pandemic, their situation being open, closed, whatever?
Closed.
Are they still closed?
I think they're open for 50% right now, and they just opened up middle of July. They were closed for a solid 4 months.
And what's their situation relative to PPE or other federal aid?
I think that the Outback, I think that they exceeded, they were too big to get the PPE, is what I've been told. You can only have 500 employees and that type of thing. My understanding is they didn't qualify. And if they did, a lot of those restaurant workers are lower paid employees, so we have other folks we work with that got PPE in the food and beverage business that got some, but covered your payroll and everything. But they've got a question of viability going forward.
Call for the question. I think they've got an increase the year before, so.
Okay, everybody clear on the motion? All right, Mr. Clerk, would you please call the vote?
All right, so the value is $1,473,500. Commissioner Morganson.
Yeah.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
No.
Chair Duda.
No.
Motion passes 4-2.
Did you say you had a residential? What was it?
I do, but I think I have to come back on that one, unless they want to do it right now.
No, yeah,
Well-
let's take Mr.
Yeah, let's
whatever.
take-
Is there anybody else that has anything on under item B though? I mean, isn't that,
No.
okay, so now we do move on to item C. Set the 2020 real property valuations for protests that were reviewed by the Board of Equalization and its referees. This being continued
So
from last
don't we
Friday.
have to take if there's a citizen here to talk about that? So-
Absolutely, we will. We aren't voting on anything yet. You'll get your opportunity. So we already have the motion on the floor left from last Friday. And so we can now continue that discussion, excuse me for not calling you up earlier. This is now the opportunity for anybody to address this board on any of these properties. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Jason Boyd, I'm here on behalf of the property located at 11355 William Plaza.
What's the address again?
11355 William Plaza.
Thank you.
Can I have a Jason Abud?
Abud.
Thank you.
So this is the house that I purchased approximately 10 years ago for $750,000. See the valuation they requested today is $1.496 million, which is $251 a foot. I provided multiple comps from my neighborhood of houses equivalent to mine, some nicer than mine, with none of them exceeding $175 a square foot, and the lower ones at $145. Most recent sale in my neighborhood, which just happened at the end of 19, was on a 4,900 square foot house that sold for $138 a foot, located at 12075 113th Court. It's my understanding that after meeting with the referee, they reduced mine to $225 a foot. I'm asking for something comparable to my neighbor's houses in the neighborhood, that were $177 a foot, $170 a foot. My house sits right on 114th Street on one side and butts the gate of the entrance to the neighborhood on the other side. Of all the comps that the assessor provided me, there was no house assessed at $251 a foot that they listed.
Well, if I can, I'll just jump in and explain. It looks like the initial referee agreed with the homeowner, but then the coordinator, who has the final say, still lowered it, but not as significantly.
The referee was very accommodating with the conversation.
So the referee lowered it to $996, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then the coordinator upped it 400,000, thereabouts. Thoughts?
Go ahead.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I did not personally, was not involved in this one. My contemporary, Tom Taft, was the coordinator on that. This property is in Thomason Woods. Spent a lot of time in Thomason Woods this session around. What we're running into up there is a very wide disparity of prices, quality, and condition of homes. We've got some houses in Thomason Woods that are classified as excellent quality properties. Not very many of those around Omaha, Nebraska. I don't want to talk about Commissioner Morgan's house, but a 30-year-old house, 40-year-old house called excellent quality is a bit of a reach to me, but that's what they've got it at. We've got other houses in Thompson Wood that are down average of good condition. They're selling for $500,000. There's a huge disparity and a huge range of values in Thomason Woods. The gentleman, most of what he proposed to us, the data he sent in, were houses that were of lower quality or condition than his.
I can appreciate that comment, but how do you know the quality of my house is excellent?
Well, sir, you'd have to ask Douglas County assessor that. But all we can go by is what they rate them at. But so when you go to excellent to good, that's a pretty big wide range. And you've got houses selling for $500,000. You've got houses selling for $1.5 million.
So the one that just sold, I believe, was very good, and they call mine excellent and good, and it sold for $138 a foot.
There's that excellent boogaboo come out at us.
So 138 to 250.
Commissioner Kaplan?
Mr. Goodwin?
I know Tomlinson Woods is quite a grab bag.
But I don't know the particulars about this specific property.
I'll give you two negatives. One is, you back up, you're right next door to 114th Street. That's a negative on his. But the other thing that's happened in Tomlinson, and I stand to be corrected, but the noise factor, they tried to get a wall, but you can't, from the Interstate 680 and the east end of the property. We did talk about this last Friday. You know, the referee put it at 986 that you met with in person, I assume?
Conference call.
Or conference call. You know, I'm not sure why it went up so much. I would think there should be a compromise there. At 986, what is that a square foot about?
$170 puts it right at $1 million a foot.
I think that's what we put the Simmons home at, which is, I don't know if it was rated an excellent quality or not, but it's kind of the same vintage. I would think we should be around that $170 a foot, is my opinion.
The last year,
What would that put this home at, Mr. Ledoux?
Last year's value was $1,015,000, $170 a foot, I think puts it at $1,300,000, something like that.
Our referee, I think, had something there.
Just briefly, the disparity between the referee and the coordinator. This is why we have coordinators. The referees, probably everybody in Tomlinson appealed. We had a dozen different people look at Thompsonwood's properties. The point of the coordinator is to come in and try to put that mishmash together and come up with some continuity in the neighborhood. And that's exactly why you've been looking at me for all these years. So we can kind of get one number coming out of it and kind of pull it all together.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle, did you have something?
Mr. Goodwillie, can you tell me what the difference is between quality is excellent and condition is good? I mean, what is it? Quality is excellent, okay, that's wonderful. Condition is good. I mean,
Quality is the nature of the build, okay?
nature,
The nature of the build, the architectural features.
so you like it, when you look at it, it's pleasing.
Well, the way it's been explained to me, a non-appraiser, is sort of the more architectural features, the more complicated it is structurally, the higher the quality of the building. So your basic 4 square box has a lower quality than something with, you know, wings and dormers and turrets and all sorts of stuff like that. Condition is just, what's the state of it? How, you know, is it in need of repair or not in need of repair? So if you pull up a picture of Mr. Aboud's property,
Beautiful home.
so yeah, there's a lot going on architecturally there. That would explain the quality of it. And then the good condition is, you know, I assume that's a judgment that our appraiser has made about what kind of maintenance may or may not be needed. Obviously, it looks beautiful.
If I could, you know, I remember doing this years ago. There was a home at 120th and Blondo. And it backed up to the intersection, and it was really horrendous. And the woman who lived there was retired, and she had cars plow into her yard frequently because whatever happens at 100. So because of the condition of the street, the neighborhood, the noise, and all the congestion, I lowered her value, and I think we're allowed to do that because it diminishes the value of the home. And I think that's what Mr. Aboud's got going here a little bit. I don't want to cast it as but the noise is definitely a factor. It diminishes the value to some extent. And so I'd like to ask you, Mr. Aboud, maybe I missed it because I was looking something up, but what would you like to see this value? What do you think is fair?
I had asked for $996. Anything around that number, I was happy with. I'm happy with last year's assessment. It just didn't go from $1 million to $1.5 million.
I would make a motion to send it at last year's value.
I'll second it.
Is last year lower than what he's asking?
Mary Ann, make a
Last
motion.
year's not lower than what he's.
That's the Same as
Oh, I'm
last year.
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Same as last year, sorry.
Okay, the motion before us is to leave the subject property steady at last year's value. Questions or comments to the motion?
Okay, is that, are we talking the 1,015,000 figure?
Yeah, $1,015,000 total value.
Everybody clear on the motion?
Yeah.
If so, I would like to call this vote.
I apologize. I know Commissioner Borges made the motion. Can we get a second?
Commissioner Boyle.
Okay, thank you. All right, we get a vote. Commissioner Borges.
Yes.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
No.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes.
Commissioner Duda.
No.
Motion passes 4-2.
Mr. Abood, you just beat City Hall.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Is this the
John,
new
I assume
list?
You're getting paid by the hour, so you're having to wait to the
Or you
last.
can go, we'll let this Sean go.
Just like Sean's this way. Couldn't wait this moment.
Hello again. Hey, last item I had on my agenda. It's a personal residence at 14243 Hamilton Street. It went from $1,580,000 to $3,350,000. We had called the county and asked for an inspection. They never came out and looked. We did have a meeting with the referee. The owner of the property had substantial information. The quality and condition is excellent. The county has an excellent quality, average condition. The house is, the finish of the house on the exterior is EFIS. If anybody's familiar with EFIS, it's a mold problem. And notwithstanding that, we're excellent. So it went to $3,350,000. We asked for an inspection. They wouldn't come out and look at it. It's on the market for $1,825,000.
That's what you're asking for?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion.
What was it again?
$1,825,000 is it's on the market for that.
I make a motion.
Question, is that listed with MLS, publicly listed at that price?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
This is it. I'm sorry, guys. I get that. 1.49 is that your second?
1.8 something.
We'll go with the purchase price, yeah, $1,825,000. Yes, sir.
That's the listed sales.
Yes, sir.
Homemakers.
Homemakers.
Mr. Goodwin?
If I might, Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor Register of Deeds Office. I don't have a lot of specifics on this particular property, but if I may raise this issue with this particular taxpayer with other residential homes he has had, he'll list them for sale at a very low price. But if you want to buy any plumbing fixture, it's extra. If you want to buy any light fixture, it's extra. And so he's able to say when he protests, or at least he has been in other situations, I've only got my property listed for sale at this, surely it can't be valued at that. And so I would take that listing price with a grain of salt.
What's the listing price again?
$1,825,000.
Well, isn't that what he paid for it too?
Dan Nash County Court, at least according to the assessor's website, it sold on November 21st, 2014 for $1.8 million.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle?
It did sell for 1.8.
So this was back in November of 2014, and yes, it sold for
Six
$1.8
years
million.
ago.
Well, we were talking earlier, I asked Mr. Goodwillie about, excellent quality and good condition. Now, this one says excellent quality and average condition. So it sounds like it's kind of maybe dated, not quite as hot as it could be.
It might be. I struggle with the idea that a property would have no appreciation and value in this marketplace in 6 years.
Well, it's a pretty unique home, and these things, I drive up and down Underwood Avenue all the time. There's a big house out there for, now it's changed realtors, and it said, you'd be home if you bought this. It's been for sale for 6 months. And I know it's not a $200,000 house, that's for sure. I think this would be difficult to sell, I think. Anyway, I'll yield.
Commissioner Morgan.
Well, selling the homes in Omaha, Nebraska for $1 million, no matter what, is a little bit challenging. $2.8 million, I gotta tell you, pretty tough. And I think, you know, the $1,825,000 seems to be a fair number. I know, and I've heard that has been a practice, Mr. Goodwillie. I don't know if it's a practice here, and I hope that's not the case, where you have to buy the plumbing fixtures and so on. This home was built by Mandolfo. I was in it when it belonged to Greg Rutherford, the seller. I went through it, and I gotta tell you, I wouldn't have bought it for the $1.5 million, $1.8 million at the time when they were trying to sell it. So I think the $1,825,000 seems like a fair number to me on this property, and especially knowing that we don't sell many homes in Omaha for over $1 million, and let alone $1.5 million. So that would be my thought about this property.
So, why do you keep that in? Why does that say with a sale price of $2.2 million?
How is it?
You know, that wasn't the price we were just told.
Well, I was giving the most recent sale.
Oh, so it went down.
Okay, all right.
So it went right.
Yeah, it went down in value from 13 to 14, so he sold it, when Rutherford had it for sale, I wouldn't have bought it for $1.5 million.
Okay, Commissioner Rogers.
What Mr. Goodwillie said, I'm not doubting, it's just that, we get into the picture stage, somebody's gonna give you some prep on how to do all that. From a lay person's view, because, personally, $1 million is out of my airspace. So, I'm not doubting it, but it's just, but whatever time, it's hard to believe that it's gonna want $2 million. So, the range of negotiation, that jump is so big, like, so that's my rationale. Like, everybody thinks you.
Why don't we hear from the referee coordinator?
Rip Coder, BOE coordinator. I just want to throw my 2 cents in because I had actually done the hearing on this property. Tom Hilt is the owner. He came in with Mr. Mullin this year. We've got a long and wonderful history with Mr. Hilt on properties.
Yeah.
He is very prone to that. He has a little Witherspoon mansion on Pacific Street. I'll sell you the house for X dollars. That does not include a bunch of things, electronics, heating, whatever, light fixtures, and a lot of antique things. The first thing that Mr. Hilt said when he sat down was there's a dispute on this as far as the condition, quality, and size of the house. He pulls out the plans, starts drawing lines on it, saying, this is wrong, that's wrong, the assessor's wrong on this. Fine, so we need to figure out what we got, or we get a number on it. If there's a dispute of so many, feet on this thing, we gotta know what we got to do it. I said, have you asked for an inspection? He said, yes, they wouldn't do it. I perused back in the assessor's notes. There was an inspection done on the basement 2 years ago, but they were very specific, that dealt with the basement, condition of the basement only. What my direction was on the case, he said, hey, I said, assessor, call Mr. Hill, here's his phone number, go on out there and inspect this thing, see what it is, see how big it is, and then let's decide what it's worth. That's how I left it.
Somebody said they didn't get introduction.
Right, so, I guess, so, let's go on. I mean, that's where it was left. Did it happen?
I don't, you call him in or they didn't? If you call us, we talk, you and I talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
This doesn't, someone answers the question. So when the referee comes across something that they think the assessor needs to look into something, they'll check this box, but I mean, the assessor, this would have just happened, so I don't know, I doubt the assessor maybe doesn't even know yet, but this is something they're going to report at the end of the season that we run for the assessor's office that says, hey, these are the protests where the referee feels an actual inspection might be needed. So it hasn't, I don't know if it has been yet, but it will be if not. Or the recommendation isn't for it to be anyway.
Thank you. Commissioner Morrison.
So, also the comment being made of his past practice when he sells the house, was that ever asked during your conversations? Is that what he plans for this one as well?
I don't know that I was even aware it was for sale. I don't know if that was even brought up or raised.
Right, so that's my point. And secondly, I don't think, even though it was past practice, which I don't agree with, you can't make a blanket statement that that's what's gonna happen at this property. So I'm a little bit put off by that comment, but,
Just to be clear, Commissioner, there's nothing in the listing agreement that accepts up, it's an à la carte purchase.
it's a way.
There's nothing in the listing agreement with the realtor, who's Deb Seisig, that this is an à la carte purchase. It's the whole thing.
Here's the whole thing.
Yes.
Thank you. One more, please. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. So, Mr. Coder, you did this property, right?
Correct.
And your opinion is 3.3509 is a fair valuation.
As what it is now, unless there is a discrepancy as far as the physical attributes of the house, the size and condition. At that stage, you look at it again and try to come to a better number.
So can we see a picture of this real quick?
House?
Because this house and the last house we did, no way around, these are mansions,
Oh, yeah.
billionaire mansions that we're giving relief to. And this house has, gosh, how many square feet? 12,512 square feet. And it's in excellent condition. And we want to give them relief.
It's average condition, just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excellent quality, average condition.
Quality is excellent. What's the difference there? Quality and condition.
Look at the quality that we were talking about in the last house. What's it made of? You know, the roof is slate as opposed to asphalt shingles. The exterior is this and that. The condition is what's it perceived at on the outside. In my mind, I got a little problem with excellent average condition, but I don't make those judgments.
So again, we're dealing with mansions now. I'm not too excited about the mansion relief here today. But thank you. Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Morgan.
I was just going to remark that Deb Seisig is an excellent real estate agent, and I would assume that she has it listed. I would think that it is, as Mr. Bowen said, if somebody comes along and offers $1,850,000, I think they'll be buying a house. So I think to have it at 100% more than what it's for sale for, something's wrong, and he did buy it for $1,800,000. The last guy tried to sell it for 2.2, and that's when I went through it just to see it, because he was my neighbor before we used to love the third. And I wouldn't have bought it even at $1,500,000 back then, if I was in the market and could afford that kind of a house. We were looking at it just because it was my house.
If I may, I'll give it to Commissioner Boyle.
I think this is extraordinary. You know, the house was valued at $1,580,000, and they raised it to $1,771,000. I mean, I just don't think that's right. And I do want to say one thing. I mean, I'm not dazzled by the mansion thing. Years ago, when we were doing cases by ourselves, a woman came in and made a pitch for reducing her valuation on a home she owned, and she and her husband owned in Elmwood Park, or Elmwood, Ferry. And so I listened to it and everything else, and in my judgment, I reduced it appropriately, you know. And about 6 months later, I saw this woman, and she was standing very close to Governor Ricketts, and actually a little too close. I thought, that's weird. Well, it turned out that I reduced the taxes on the governor's house. So, which I would have done anyway, but she said, thank you, you treated me with respect, and I said, you know, the fact that you have money doesn't mean you shouldn't be treated fairly. So that's what I'm looking at here. You know, I think we need to step aside and look at it and come up with a figure, and I would defer to someone else, I don't need to be the one who comes up with this, but I think we need to lower it substantially.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaplan.
Well, I don't know how many more residents we got. The only residents we have so far are Thomas and Woods and Linda Estate. Neither of them are in distressed areas. I gotta think there's a lot more property tax payers in this city who have modest means of modest homes that are in a lot worse situation than millionaire cities on millionaire properties in Thomas and Woods and Linda Estate.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? Mr. Robbins?
See, I agree with the sentiment, but the gap for me is not basically get out there. It's gonna be new material. So I'm kind of feeling like almost double the prices of Georgia. It's junk. We would have got out there and we would get it. You know, and validate that problem. I would predict this without us being able to do the follow-up. I don't know. I'm not saying we just stress either. I'm trying to do the process.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan.
Just, I want to respond to Commissioner Kavanaugh about Linden and Thomas and Woods. Regency, homes that we bought for $1,000,001. They were at $650,000 last year. They're down to $619 this year. The price per square foot, and they're great homes that I'd love to pay you $250,000 if I can buy them for last year's value. This home, there isn't any way, in my opinion, and I know we're on record, that this home could sell for $3 million. I mean, and if it is listed, and as I said, Deb Seisig is probably one of the most respected agents in the city. If she has it listed, I believe she honestly has it listed, and you're telling us that if somebody wants to buy it for $1.8 million, they can buy it for that.
Yes,
And the
Commissioner.
reason you have Thomas and Woods is you have homes listed and homes that have sold for less than what they're assessed for now by 20% or more. So that's why, and you have big increases where other subdivisions you didn't. And I think the referees did an excellent job in many, many areas of the city, and I've heard from taxpayers on that, on the consideration that they gave on 42nd off of Leavenworth to the south, and some of the other areas of our city. So, I just think that if it's listed at $1.8 million, that has to be close to where the market, I think, for this property is. And you can look at homes on 96th Street that are listed. In Oman, I don't have any of those listed, but they're for sale, and they're for sale for less than what they paid for them. And they're $1 million homes, and they're not selling. On the east side of 96th Street, you got several right in a row for sale, and they're for sale for less than what people paid for 4 or 5 years ago. That's a fact.
Time is becoming an increasing factor here as we want to make sure we get to.
Well, I'm trying to make a motion to get us out of here.
Commissioner Boyle.
I make a motion that we set the value at $1.8 million.
Well, there was already a,
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah.
I didn't hear it, I'm sorry.
yeah, 1.825 million is a motion right now.
Okay.
Okay, further questions or comments to the motion before us? If not, I would call for the vote.
That was made by Commissioner Ryder, second by Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
No.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers. Chair Duda.
No.
Motion passes 4-2.
Thank you. Okay. Other property owners. Speak now or forever hold your peace. I think it's on the two of you.
I guess it's my
So
turn.
we get break, Sean.
I
it to be brave?
Like it or not.
This one's for you.
Thanks.
Our latest building in Florida.
Is it
So,
really?
yeah, she would love it.
She would. I'm here on only one property. Sean James Smith Slusky Law, here on behalf of the Baird Family Trust. What I've handed you is some additional information that went in very late to the referee. I'm not sure the referee had sufficient time to really digest it. So I'd like you to take a look at it. This is based on 2019 income. It is a retail property out in Oakview. And as you all know, the condition of Oakview is getting pretty bad. In addition to high vacancy rates, loss of anchor tenants and everything else, the entire area is going downhill. And the income analysis that you will find a couple pages in, it says Client Baird Family Trust at the top, shows you the gross income, total expenses for 17, 18, and 19, and the NOI as a result. And you can see that in 19, the NOI was under $5,000. So we're very concerned with this property. It is vacant primarily. There are two tenants. There is a rent roll attached. The tenants that are in there have very limited time on their leases left. And the idea that this property is going to increase income is pretty slim. It's an aging property. It's in a horrible area. Oakview is a horrible area. And I don't think anybody in that corner will disagree that valuations for Oakview are all over the board. And it needs to be addressed. And I'm not sure this is the correct place to address it. I'm just asking for one property to be addressed.
It is the correct place to ask for that.
So if you have questions, I'm here to answer.
All right, Commissioner Campbell.
Yes, and so it's currently at 1.7, and I believe the DOE said 1.9. Is that correct?
What's
Go
the,
back to the, I'm reading these numbers right.
no, the current 2020 is the 1.9 also. That's what the assessor recommended, and that's what the
And
referees.
what are you asking for?
We're asking for basically half of that. I'm asking for 822.7 based upon the actual income and expenses. I realize that that drastic cut is probably not within the comfort range of the referee or the referee coordinator. It's another reason why we're here today.
I'm sorry, you're asking for 822,
822.7.
and the land is at about 817.
Yes. I think the land's way overvalued at $15 a square foot in Oakview.
Could we see history on this, Mr. Clerk? It has come down in recent years on the buildings. What was in these buildings?
This is a retail building, and right now there's a nail spa and a Jimmy John's. That's all that's left in this building.
Okay, so there are tenants.
Yes, it's a retail property. It's on one of those outside, it's on the outside ring road.
So it's not vacant because of the pandemic.
No, it was vacant beforehand.
Could we hear from the DOE?
Absolutely. This is an interesting property, know a little bit about it. Actually had another use in it. It was one of those that got chopped up into multiple.
Could you speak up just a bit?
I'm sorry. That was a building that had one use and then was chopped up into multiple uses. But as I'm sorry. No, I just don't want to apologize.
No.
Um,
I'm sorry, I didn't want to stand in front of you.
Good luck finding the right
I didn't want to
spot.
walk. What was that one use? Keep talking.
Was that the Pepe de Po's restaurant originally? Back when it was built? I can't quite remember. But it's been cut up into multiple spaces. But this is not an unusual circumstance that actually both my favorite Sean's have this year. And I've even had some conversation with it. Again, this becomes back to that plug and play. It's not making anybody. You're going to plug in the low number where it's at, and that's one way to approach it, but that doesn't take in all the additional situations such as risk. And if you had a fully vacant property, you don't just cap it at where it's at. You actually, if your income's lower, you would cap it even lower because anticipation of where you're headed with it. But as I have mentioned to both the assessor's office and some of these individuals, this is for next year particularly. Most of these properties that get into significant vacancy problems need to probably be addressed through a discounted cash flow analysis. It's the one and only way that you're going to get a value that will more accurately depict what you have. I looked on the referee comments here, and I did agree with him. He said, hey, I've got a situation here. We're making the assumption the assessor is correct, and that's what we've been told to do by law. We are then submitted information from the protester, property owner, to look at to see if we are persuaded to change that one way or another. I'm not saying that Ms. James doesn't have some good information, but it would take an extraordinary amount of time to go into that, and I truly believe we would come back to a number that would be somewhere in between these two, not necessarily close to one or the other. I'm not going to make that call, but it certainly would be probably not as low as Ms. James, and certainly lower than maybe where the assessor. I'm just telling you what we've got, what we're left with, and we're doing the best we can with it. I hope that's acceptable.
Thank you. That's good. Oh, the assessor, I guess, if there's anything.
No, I think that's reasonable.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
Okay, let me ask you a question. I heard you say the NOI on this property, and this was 19, so we're not dealing with the virus. What was your NOI?
$4,871
For the year?
for the year.
Jeez. And all I'd say, and I stand to be corrected because I do respect what the referees do and what the assessor does, but I got to tell you, selling a property today where you have $5,000 worth of income, and let's multiply and tell you, you got $25,000 worth of income, to buy it for $2 million, you got less than a 1% return. I mean, and you don't know when you're going to rent it. The other problem when you rent is, let's say you found a salon to go in, or you found something else to go in. You're going to spend, and again, anyone can correct me, you're going to spend $80 a foot minimum. And if you're really putting in a salon or doctor's office, you're going to spend over $100 a foot. They're building buildings right now at First National Bank Park. I went through it, not involved. I was invited to go to see it. They spent $160 on the TI in that office building, and it's not for doctors or some big plumbing operation. So, I mean, if those numbers are accurate, I got to tell you, I'd like to, you know.
Commissioner Morgan, I think that's just what I said, but we didn't have enough to be able to come back and go through this added calculation. You wouldn't take 4,000, capitalize it at 10 or any other number and say it's only worth 40,000. Correct? I think you would agree with me on that. It's not worth 40,000, but it's probably not worth the $2 million. There's work that needs to be done to actually find out what a number market-supported evidence would support here. And quite frankly, we don't have enough information in the packet to do that.
How many square feet are in this building?
11,716. That's the building.
Slightly smaller than that mansion we just did.
So, you know, like I said, I mean, you're seeing buildings sell for $100 a foot right off of 78th and Dodge, or less. There's a sale right now taking place on part of an office that's fully occupied and selling for, I think, under $90 a foot. So to me, what is the request for the number?
I had requested 822,700. And I would like to say that if you look at this income sheet, there is backup documentation for 18 and 19 that has the actual numbers on it, and the NOI at various cap rates was under $60,000.
Who do you have it, and I don't want the listing, okay? Who do you have it listed with to try to rent it?
Right now, it is with CBRE.
CBRE. Great, good, excellent company. How long have they had it? A while?
At least 3 years.
I gotta tell you, to me, the request of 800 and some thousand, I mean, it seems more than fair. And I'd make the motion on that, but I wanna hear all the discussion.
I second it.
Okay, and I'm hoping we don't have too much discussion as we try to wrap things up in a timely fashion. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
I'm just trying to put this in perspective. That's a 50% cut from where they are now. Is that what you're proposing?
Well, I'm trying to use logic that if you bought it for 800,000 and you happen to have 800,000 and you put it on this table, at the end of the year, you're gonna have 5,000 return on your 800,000. And if you're lucky enough to rent it, they've got it listed with CBRE for over a year, 2
Probably
years.
at least 2 years. maybe 3.
Okay, if you're lucky enough to lease it, you're gonna have to make improvements to the building because it's been sitting there vacant. Secondly, you're gonna have to pay a commission. I mean, I don't get how you get, I hope you get this sold someday, but I'm telling you, it's a challenge. And then I'm adding on to that, that's in a great market. And I'm seeing across the street on 78, they're 120th and Center, 131st and Center. There's so much space out there that's set vacant for years.
So I think I've heard you say this before, and everybody kind of uses this as a yardstick. Would you sell it for $822,000?
At this point in time, yes.
So maybe you'll be the buyer.
Would you buy it for $822,000?
I would buy it for $450,000 because I don't know when it's gonna rent. And all I'm gonna do is pump money and do it, once I pay the taxes, if I buy it for $400,000, you know what I've left on the table, buy it for $400, minus $3,000 if I don't have to buy insurance. And I know numbers as good as maybe their weakest referee.
I call the question.
Okay,
Okay, that's all I
are you
have.
through? Okay, Commissioner Rogers, you said ask.
Give me yeah, I know you don't have the analysis, whatever, but give me a number because I
You
can't-
want me to gut it?
Well, I'm just saying, I can't agree with, it's about the failure.
No, and this is exactly what I
I can't
said.
agree with that number.
We start looking at sales, and even if you're buying a vacant building, because you're buying it on the anticipation of what you're gonna do with it, who you're gonna lease. Maybe you got some in your back pocket, but you're gonna go forward. But it's in a situation where it's definitely distressed, and is it worth $1 million? In my humble opinion, it's probably worth at least $1 million. Is it worth $2 million? Probably not at this point in the game. Specifically knowing what we know now, it's not.
So were you at 1.2 or something? Because
I didn't even say 1.2. I said $1 million.
Okay, then, for the sake of time, I'm hearing somewhere around there. I know I'm not going for 8. So if we get the gauge, I mean, I'm somewhere, based on what you're saying, knowledge-wise, I'm somewhere 1.2.
If you went out and found a few buildings that were selling for $80 a square foot, it's probably not too bad, 80, 90. And to Commissioner Morgan, yes, they paid $800,000 back when they bought it, and then they spent probably $400,000 in renovations and breaking it up and doing exactly what you're saying. When you've got vacant space, you must retrofit it, improve it, change it. And so value can ebb and flow on any building based upon those pieces of the evidence. And I think at this point with the vacancy, you've got a, what I would call temporary distressed value that's below what the market would drive it at.
Can I just add something for Chris? Chris, the only thing I'm saying about this is what I like about what they're doing, and I've never met you before to my knowledge. And I haven't ever been involved in this property for sure. But the fact is, they've got a really good company trying, CBRE is one of the best, trying to get it leased, and they haven't, so they've been working at it. And I'm taking your word for the numbers of the $5,000 cash flow. And you said, which you sell them for 8.25. If you were a buyer at 8.25, and they would sell it, I gotta tell you, that person, I'd like to meet him, because I got some things I'd like to sell. And Sean, you and I will have a talk after this, because when I hear this stuff, I mean, I'm shocked. This is a tough deal. This one's kind of a no-brainer, truthfully, Chris. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but really, if you bought it for the 800, all you're gonna have left at the end of the year on your 800 is $5,000. You better take your money to the bank, at least you get 1%, and you got 8,000 left on the table. And they're paying taxes and insurance and everything out of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Ms. James, weren't you before us recently?
Yes, on
Yes,
Friday,
thank you. I thought
for the 425.
Okay,
This
because,
is different.
you know, we just gave the better part of $2 million to millionaires mansion relief. These are people who are working for a living in a very distressed, Oakview Mall area, which looks like it's been hollowed out, and it's sad. I defer to my colleague, Mr. Morgan's expertise in this, that, you know, if they're at 822, he would touch it for half of that. I mean, that kind of talks to me, in light of the fact that we just gave better part of a couple $2 million relief to a mansion that, you know, isn't struggling in a mall that's failing to keep paying our property taxes. I don't know. I mean, if there's a reasonable number that you guys can get together with, I think there's some number in there that we should go to that's not $2 million. So say a number, I guess.
We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop people real quick if we can't keep our comments short, because we are gonna run out of time and we're gonna get everything we need to do. Commissioner Boyle.
Jim, are you on this team or are you a spectator? I mean, if you
Can't
want to,
hear you.
if you think we gave a millionaire a break, you gotta treat people fairly. I don't give a damn what their financial statement is. And that's, I'm sorry to say that in public, but honest to God, get off your perch.
Okay, I'd like the focus to stay on this property, the motion before us. Further comments to the motion before us?
It's set at $822,700.
Is that? Okay, yes.
Who made that?
Motion by Commissioner Morgan, second by Commissioner Boyle.
There we go.
Correct?
Correct.
All right. So I'm going to vote.
Yes, please,
Okay,
please.
Commissioner Morganson. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers. Chair Duda.
No.
Motion passes 4-3.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sean.
Say hello to Gail for
Yeah.
me and Gloria.
I knew Sean when she was a real person before she became a lawyer.
It's true. I just want to make a comment, kind of piggybacking on what Commissioner Boyle said. When we sit as Board of Equalization, we sit in front of each property independently of what other decisions have been made, unless we're looking at properties within the same subdivision. That's my opinion. It doesn't matter if we hear a house on, you know, whatever, in a house, you know, another address, another area of the town, of our county, we are listening, or we are taking that property independently of everything else, again, unless it's within that subdivision. And so what decisions were made prior have no bearing on what was before us as we hear the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else?
Yes. Catherine.
Well,
I'm observing.
You have no action for us. You have no life? Excuse me, Catherine, the floor is yours. I'm sorry. No.
Is it clerical errors? Yep. So Dan's already pulled up, I just wanted to speak to, there was a property, someone representing two properties who was here earlier, who left but had identified what they thought were perhaps two clerical errors among the recommendations before the board. And so there's a mechanism to address those later, but we just thought we'd present those to the board because they're known at this point. So I can identify those if the board wants to take action on those, correct those errors right now, and Mr. Musto can speak to.
What was the error?
There were errors in values. There were two properties. The one that's up right now, I believe, is Ed Miller and Sons. In your packets, and it's on list B on page 19. And I believe there were typographical errors in the recommended value from the.
And to this taxpayer's or representation, he came in because the value was about half of what he was expected because there are two buildings on that site. And when we looked at it, we did the calculation on only one of them, so it created about half value. So he knew there was a problem. It's been recreated. He wasn't as thrilled when he didn't get as much of a cut, but he said, no, that's fine. That's fine. You at least corrected it, so we don't have to deal with it later. Because it was taking a $3 million property and putting it at 1.5.
So there is no action that we need to take to correct the record?
Unless it's not in the record, because I corrected it this morning looking at it, and I don't know when this record, this document was printed, and if you're doing it on that document, unless you want to say these would need to be corrected on there.
All right.
And I don't know that the legalities of what you need to do there.
Sorry.
We've got some smart people in the room, and one of them tells me what to do.
Well, so the board could have changed the values on your recommendations right now and make the correction. If you don't do it today, there's a mechanism later to do the correction, but it just seems simpler now that we've identified where the errors are now. The board can take action to change those values while they're before you.
May I, Mike, does this all sound kosher?
I think it'd be easier to change it now if you can.
Okay, fine.
I
don't know what hoops procedurally you have to jump through.
I moved to change it
Yeah,
now
they're
as
both-
per Catherine's request.
Both items are on list B, so they're before you already. This is just, instead of adopting the referee recommended value that's before you, you would adopt these because these were what the referee intended to put.
Okay, very good.
So I made the motion.
Motion and a second.
So
Questions or comments?
I'm confused as to what we're trying to set it at.
Right.
That's why you, okay. You
got the
confirm
numbers.
these for me, Chris. So there's Ed Miller and Sons on,
Okay.
before you, it's list B.
How about parcel number?
Yeah, let's do that.
You ready?
Yeah.
Dan?
Yes.
Parcel 140-447-5023. Value $3,547,800.
Okay.
Parcel number 0512240.
Hold on, 051 what?
05122403440.
Okay.
Value $4,314,500.
Now, wait a minute, what was that, all Ed Miller?
That was the second
Two
part.
two properties.
What's the other one? I can't find that.
No, the other one was Donovan Properties. The second one was Donovan Properties.
Okay.
And who's the first one?
Ed Miller.
And what's the valuation on the second?
$4,314,500.
Okay, everybody clear on what's before us?
Yes.
What are we being asked?
Well, it's just the referees noticed and they agreed, the homeowner agrees, right? You talked to them that there's just a clerical error made and they're correcting what they meant, what they intended to present to the board today. And so he just gave us the figures of what the reps should have submitted to the board to approve today for these two properties.
Okay, further questions or comments to the motion?
Who made it?
Commissioner Morgan, and I'll say it. Did you, all right, Commissioner Boyle, second. Okay, further questions or comments to the motion, then would you please hold up?
Commissioner Morganson.
Yes.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Kratz Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
this is on 6005 Evans Street. It was a property that was at $113,100 last year, but they wrote in a requested value of $113,100,000. And the referee meant to set it back at last year's value of $113,100, but they chose the requested value, so this person's property is about to be like the 4th most expensive property in all of Douglas County.
That's gonna be a wonderful escrow.
Yeah.
We got a net zero deal, so we gotta come out either.
Yeah, $113,100 was essentially the 2019 value.
And that's my mistake. Take it. But you know what? When I'm going to make them, I'm going to make them big.
So we have a motion to set 6005 Evans at $113,100.
I second it.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments? Did anybody ever tell the homeowner what happened? Or you wait until we...
We'll catch, yeah.
I think-
He hasn't contacted us, but...
I think if you fix it, they won't have us strong.
All right. I would ask them to vote.
All right, Commissioner Morrison. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Kraft's absent. Commissioner Rogers. Commissioner Morgan, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And Chair Udine.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. I believe we are done with amendments now, to the best of my knowledge.
I have a
Commissioner Boyle.
request. I'd like to ask everyone here, and I don't know what we're going to do with the ones that weren't completed. I don't know how we handle those. That's a question we have to ask our legal counsel. But I also want to ask all the people who participated today to please think of a way that we can start talking about making this system work. I mean, none of us, I was up late at night, and I called Dan Esch, and he helped me get some stuff put together on Sunday night, but to go through these, it just doesn't work. And then, of course, really wore you out. So,
Hey, I was up. You could call me. I'm up all night. That's what I tell my referees.
well, I got 1 hour of sleep last night. So anyway, that's why I'm cranky. But anyway, the deal is, let's think about improving this for Douglas County. It doesn't work.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Before we come back to vote on the motion with all of its amendments now, again, I am going to ask if the board would indulge me and pull my own house out of it, that I might abstain on that. I don't know the process for doing that. I have the process number and the parcel number. Captain,
It's on the big sheet.
Yeah, 13031 North River Drive.
correct, that's the parcel I would like separated.
Supposed to approve minus that parcel.
Second.
Okay, questions or comments to the motion before us? So this is all the amendments, all the recommendations with the one property.
Okay, have you, in the sheet, are there the 400 and some properties? How have we addressed those that didn't go to the referee?
They
Are
haven't
they in
been
the
discussed
sheet?
yet, so that's unresolved.
Okay, so but they're not in the sheet.
There are 3 lists.
Okay,
List A, which was presented to the board last week, is what was completed at that time. List B, which is what's been completed since then. List C, for which the recommendations haven't been completed by a referee.
So what happens to the properties on list C?
so I would recommend that the board just agree and sustain the value recommended by the assessor. Because they're the only experts that have looked at the property, it makes sense to listen to the smart people that you.
All right, and all of these property owners still have
They do, they can go
the
to
opportunity to go to court?
Yes, they do.
Thank you, Commissioner Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we not already have a motion from last Friday on the table?
Oh, yeah, you're
So
right.
your motion would just be an amendment.
Okay,
to
thank
pull
you.
that.
Thank you for the clarification. You're right, you're right.
And I probably should almost abstain because there's some properties that we manage that are involved in that were on that list rental property. So, and I would abstain. And my own property was in there that the referees looked at all.
Okay,
I'd like to offer an amendment.
all right.
I'd like to change that. My amendment is that we not go with the new assessment value, but we go back to last year's assessment. And that's the only thing fair to do. These people have not had a chance to even appeal, and some of them are substantial, $200,000 and $300,000 increases. So I would amend that motion to establish the last year's value as this year's value, in fairness to the taxpayer.
All right. I will accept that as an amendment, I think, to the motion before us, that,
I second that
that
amendment.
those properties in list C, that the referees did not get to yet, their values would all be rolled back to, just held automatically at last
Yes.
resort.
Yes.
Okay, we will vote on that amendment first and separate.
Okay, so the motion was by Boyle, the second was by Borges?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers. Yes. Mr. Chair.
No.
Motion passes five.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, I would like to offer an amendment, if I may, to pull my property out. I guess that's the way to do it. Thank you. Could we
I'd
please?
like to offer an amendment, I want to double Claire's, no, never.
I second it.
Yeah, you got a second too.
Okay, this is the poll, 130311 North River Drive off the list for approval right now. Commissioner Borgeson. Mr. Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Mr. Kraft is absent. Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Morgan, I keep skipping you. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for that. Now I will come back to the motion as a whole with just that one property carved out. So this is all the amendments we have voted on, all of the recommendations that have been brought to us, and including rolling back those that we did not get to last year's time. Yeah.
Okay. We gotta vote on it. The motion's been seconded already.
You may want to.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Kraft is absent. Commissioner Morgan abstains. Commissioner Rogers. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 yes.
Yes, I got to get on.
Okay, so the motion to, I guess, I'm going to
Approve the referee recommendation.
no, hold the referee's recommendation.
Thanks,
Chris's motion. I think we can include adjournment with this motion. There's nothing else for the good of the cause.
It's not.
Thank you. Okay.
And before you have a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers. Mr. Chair.
Abstain.
Motion passes 5-0 yes.
See you later, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Master. I hope you go to sleep right now. Thank you. Thank you.